Brexit trade talks resume today with just 8 months for Britain and the European Union to secure an agreement before the end of the transition period. Negotiators have 4 major hurdles to overcome. Officials will meet by video conference for a full week of negotiations as the process resumes after the coronavirus pandemic forced both sides to shelve plans for face-to-face talks. Chief negotiators David Frost and Michel Barnier haven't met since the first week of March, but agreed to reboot the talks. They have scheduled 2 further negotiating rounds for May 11 and June 1 as part of a cut-down timetable. Both sides were due to hold at least 5 weeks of negotiations before the middle of May, as agreed before the COVID-19 outbreak brought Europe to a standstill. Messrs. Frost and Barnier will lead a high-level opening session this afternoon before handing down the majority of work to 11 subcommittees. Negotiators will discuss areas such as trade in goods and services, fisheries, and there will also be discussions on road and aviation transport, energy and nuclear cooperation, justice and home affairs issues, and how the overall deal should be set out before a closing session on Friday afternoon. The talks face a dramatic escalation in the coming months after Boris Johnson's government signalled it would reject any further delays to Brexit. Mr. Frost said, "Transition ends on December 31, we will not extend it. If the EU asks, we will say no." This leaves both sides hunting significant process before a high-level meeting between Mr. Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission's president, in June. The Prime Minister has previously warned he would walk away from the negotiating table if a deal with Brussels looks unlikely and prepare for a World Trade Organization exit from the EU's single market and customs union. Negotiators face challenges in bridging the gap. Fisheries. Brussels, and some of the bloc's most influential leaders, have insisted on upholding reciprocal access to the UK's fishing waters as the price for any future trade deal. Britain, however, has insisted on taking back control of its waters as the cornerstone of its Brexit policy. The government has decided to allow EU fishermen some access, but wants to decide this during annual negotiations with the EU Commission. Under the plans, quota shares will be divided up using new scientific methods instead of the bloc's hated common fisheries policy. Competition policy. The so-called level playing field is at the heart of the EU's demands for any future relationship with Britain. Brussels wants to keep Britain tied to its state aid rules, which requires oversight from judges at European Court of Justice, and prevent the government from slashing environmental and workers' rights standards. But Mr. Frost has warned his army of over 100 negotiators that their role in the talks is to deliver on the result of the 2016 EU referendum, which means reclaiming sovereignty from the bloc. He has warned his EU counterparts that Britain will policing and criminal justice. Mr. Barnier has said if Britain wants to continue working with Brussels on security and criminal justice, this section of the deal must face oversight by the ECJ and the European Convention on Human Rights. The EU's chief negotiator insists any data sharing agreements, which handles information on European citizens, should be enforceable by the bloc's Luxembourg-based judges. But in line with his negotiating guidelines, Mr. Frost has refused to accept this demand as part of any pact. The UK still wants to maintain as near as possible to the existing arrangements on the same basis as other third countries, such as Iceland, Norway, who do not have full access to some of the EU's security databases and joint policing. The structure of the overall deal. Governance remains a huge challenge for both sides to overcome, with Brussels favouring an all-encompassing agreement and Britain instead hoping for a series of mini-deals. Mr. Barnier wants every aspect of the deal housed within a framework that is underpinned by governance and level playing field provisions. The government is seeking to replicate standard free trade agreements, such as the Canada Pact, that have already been agreed with third countries by the bloc. Mr. Frost argues he does not want as ambitious a deal as being sought by Brussels and is willing to settle for a bare-bones agreement with a series of side deals.